The screen door hung open between us, and the late afternoon sun poured across the threshold like honey, slow and golden and thick with dust motes dancing in its light. She stood there with her backpack slung over one shoulder, the strap cutting a diagonal line across her chest, and in her hand she held a bus ticket curled tight from being gripped too long in a damp palm. I could see the edges were softening, beginning to fray at the corners like she had been turning it over and over in her fingers. All day, maybe all week, maybe since she first decided to leave. I wanted to say so many things. I wanted to tell her about the weather forecast for the cities she would pass through, how the rain would come sudden and hard in the mountains and she should keep her window rolled up. I wanted to remind her to drink water, not just coffee or soda. I wanted to ask if she had packed the sweater I knit for her last winter, the blue one with the loose thread at the cuff that she always complained about but wore anyway. I wanted to say, wait just one more week, one more day. One more hour, let me make your favorite meal, let me sit with you on the couch and watch nothing on television, just be in the same room a little longer. But I did not say any of these things. Instead I watched her breathe. She stood straighter than I remembered, her shoulders pulled back, not in defiance but in certainty, the kind of certainty that comes not from arrogance but from quiet hours spent alone with one's own thoughts, the kind of certainty that cannot be argued with because it was not built for debate, it was simply true for her. And in that moment I saw not the child who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, but someone else, someone who had been growing while I wasn't looking, someone who had learned things in silence that I would never know. She said she was grown now. She did not shout it, she did not throw it at me like a challenge, she simply stated it as one might state the color of the sky or the fact that winter follows autumn. It was not a request for permission, it was an observation, a gentle correction of my perception, and in that correction I felt the ground shift beneath me, not violently but like the slow settling of earth after rain, the kind of shift that rearranges foundations without breaking them. I thought of all the ways I could have fought her. I could have listed her failures, the time she flooded the kitchen trying to boil pasta, the way she still could not change a tire or jump-start a car, the fact that she sometimes forgot to eat when she was busy with a book or a thought. I could have reminded her of every scraped knee, every feverish night, every time she had called me from school because she felt sick or sad or simply small. I could have wrapped my arms around her and held on, not tightly but with the quiet desperation of someone trying to anchor a boat in rising water. But I did not, because fighting her would have been fighting the truth, and the truth was this: she had already left me in every way that mattered. Her body was still here on my porch, but her heart had packed its bags weeks ago, maybe months. Her mind had already mapped routes and calculated risks and dreamed of horizons I could not see from my kitchen window. Fighting her would not have brought her back, it would only have taught her to hide her leaving next time, to slip away in the night with a note on the counter. Instead of standing here in the honest light of day offering me this final gift, the chance to let her go with dignity. So I stepped aside. It was not a dramatic movement, no sweeping gesture, no theatrical sigh. I simply shifted my weight from one foot to the other and moved my body out of the doorway, creating a space wide enough for her to pass through. The floorboard beneath my feet creaked the same way it always had, a sound I knew as well as my own heartbeat, and in that small familiar noise I felt the enormity of what was happening. This was not a temporary goodbye, this was not off to college with plans to return for holidays, this was a true leaving, the kind that changes the shape of a life permanently. She did not rush through the opening I made for her. She paused just for a moment, her eyes meeting mine, and in that look there was no triumph, no guilt, no anger, only a deep and steady gratitude, the kind that passes between two people who understand each other without words. She was thanking me for not making it harder. She was thanking me for seeing her as she truly was, not as I wished her to be, and I was thanking her for giving me the chance to do the right thing even when it broke me a little. Then she turned. The screen door swung shut behind her with its familiar sigh, the spring catching and pulling the frame back into place with a soft thud that echoed through the empty house. Before I even realized it was empty, I heard the sound of her footsteps on the gravel path leading to the road, each crunch of stone beneath her shoes a punctuation mark in the sentence of her leaving. Winter settled over the house like a blanket, thick and quiet and slow to lift. The days grew short, the light arriving late and leaving early. I learned to live inside this new rhythm, waking in darkness, making coffee in darkness, watching the sky pale from black to gray through the kitchen window. The fern on the sill curled its leaves tight against the cold but did not die. I watered it faithfully each Saturday morning, my fingers brushing the soil, feeling for dampness, a small ritual that anchored me to the week. Meanwhile she was learning different lessons. Her postcards arrived less frequently now, not because she was forgetting but because her life had filled with the ordinary weight of survival. She wrote about a roommate who played guitar badly but with great feeling, about a laundromat where she spent Sunday evenings folding clothes while watching strangers come and go, about the way snow fell in that city, different from our snow here, softer, quieter, piling up on fire escapes and bus stop roofs. She had found a second job stocking shelves at a grocery store overnight when the store was empty and the fluorescent lights hummed like distant insects. She wrote that the silence there was different from the silence at home. It was not lonely, it was peaceful, a space she owned completely for those 4 hours between midnight and dawn. I imagined her pushing a cart down long aisles, stacking cans in neat rows, her breath visible in the cold storage room, her hands moving with a competence I had not known she possessed. This was the gift of distance. I could see her clearly now, not as a child to be protected but as a person building a life brick by brick in the dark. My own hands found new work. The library began giving me more responsibility, not because I asked but because I showed up Thursday after Thursday, my fingers learning the weight of different books, the smell of aging paper versus fresh ink. I started a small reading hour for young children Tuesday afternoons in the corner by the window where the light fell warm and golden at that hour. The first time I read to them my voice shook. 5 children sat cross-legged on a rug, their faces upturned, expectant. I opened the book, my hands trembling slightly, but as I began to speak something settled in my chest, the words flowing easier, the children leaning forward when the story reached its exciting part, their small gasps filling the space between sentences. Afterward a boy with messy hair tugged my sleeve. Again he said simply. And I read it again. That small moment, the tug on my sleeve, the trust in his eyes, it did not fill the space she left but it added something new beside it, a different kind of purpose, not replacement but addition, life making room for both loss and new connection. Spring arrived, tentative at first. A crocus pushed through frozen ground near the porch steps. I noticed it one morning while carrying the trash to the curb, its purple head brave against the lingering cold. I stood there longer than necessary watching it until my fingers grew numb from the cold can in my hand. That same week she sent a postcard of a city park, trees in blossom, pink clouds against a blue sky. She had written, I sat under one of these trees today eating an apple. I thought about how you always said spring arrives whether we notice it or not. You were right, I am noticing now. I taped the card to the refrigerator beside the others, the pink blossoms bright against the white door, a promise of warmth to come. She was learning to cook. Her messages began including small victories. I made soup from scratch, no recipe, just what was in the fridge. It was actually good. Or I finally figured out how to make rice that isn't mushy. Small triumphs that would have seemed insignificant before she left but now carried the weight of self-sufficiency, each message a brick in the foundation of her independence. I found myself saving recipes, tearing pages from magazines or writing instructions on note cards, recipes for soups that warmed from the inside, recipes for bread that filled a house with the smell of comfort. I did not send them to her, this was not my place anymore. She was learning her own way and my interference, however well intentioned, would only undermine what she was building. Instead I cooked for myself, learning to. I tried dishes she would have wrinkled her nose at before leaving, spicy curries, bitter greens, roasted vegetables with edges charred crisp. I discovered I liked foods I had avoided for years, assuming she would not eat them, my palate expanding along with my solitude, each meal a small act of reclamation. This kitchen was still mine, this life still mine to shape. One afternoon I found a box in the back of the hall closet. Photographs loose in a cardboard container, faces smiling from beaches, picnics, birthday parties, her face changing gradually across the images, baby cheeks softening into childhood angles, then the sharp beautiful lines of almost adulthood. I sat on the floor surrounded by memories, not with sadness but with curiosity. Who were we then? Who had we become? I did not put the photos away that evening. Instead I spread them across the living room floor, arranging them not by date but by feeling, the laughing ones together, the quiet ones together, the ones where our eyes met the camera, and the ones where we were caught unaware living our lives. I saw patterns I had not noticed before, the way she always reached for my hand in crowds, the way I always stood slightly behind her in photos as if giving her space to shine. That night I dreamed we were walking through a field of tall grass. The sun warm on our shoulders, we did not speak but walked side by side, our steps falling into an easy rhythm, the grass whispering against our legs, a sound like secrets being shared. We walked for a long time, neither leading, neither following, simply moving together through the gold light. I woke with the feeling still in my body, the warmth, the rhythm, the quiet companionship. It was not a dream of the past but a dream of something possible, a future not identical to what we had lost but transformed by the distance we had traveled apart. Summer approached, the days lengthened, the light staying late into evening, painting the walls gold. Well past 7 o'clock I started sitting on the porch steps after dinner, watching the neighborhood come alive, children riding bicycles, their laughter ringing through the warm air, couples walking dogs, their conversations floating on the breeze, the world continuing its gentle pulse. She called one evening while I was shelling peas into a bowl. Her voice came through the phone clear and tired but warm. She told me about a festival in the park that weekend, music and food stalls and crowds so thick she could barely move. She had gone alone, she said, and it was not lonely, it was freeing to move through a crowd with no destination, no one to meet, just the pleasure of being among people sharing the same sky. I told her about the peas, the way the pods split open with a satisfying pop, the bright green pearls inside, the simple pleasure of preparing food with my hands. We talked for 30 minutes about nothing and everything. The weight of the peas in my palm, the weight of her voice in my ear, two different kinds of fullness existing in the same moment. I realized halfway through our conversation that I was not waiting for her to come home, I was enjoying her exactly as she was right then, a voice on the phone, a person living her life 1,000 miles away, and that was enough. The fern on the windowsill had grown. A new shoot emerged from the soil, bright green and determined, reaching for the light. I touched it gently each morning, a small acknowledgement between us, two living things thriving in the same house though one of us was absent. I began sleeping with the window open. The night air carried the scent of cut grass and blooming jasmine, the distant sound of a train whistle, a dog barking, 2 streets over. These sounds that once would have reminded me of her absence now simply filled the space with life. The world was not empty, it was full of small beautiful things waiting to be noticed. She sent a photograph, not a postcard this time but a printed image slipped into an envelope. It showed her sitting on a fire escape, legs dangling over the edge, a city spread out below her in glittering lights. She was not smiling at the camera but looking slightly away, her expression thoughtful, peaceful. The wind had caught a strand of hair across her face. She looked not like a child playing at independence but like a person who had earned her peace. I placed the photograph on the mantel. Not hidden away, not displayed prominently, just there where I would see it sometimes while passing through the room, a quiet witness to her becoming. The year was halfway gone. Not measured in calendar pages but in small transformations, the way my hands no longer reached for 2 mugs, the way her messages carried less explanation and more simple sharing, the way we had both learned to stand on our own 2 feet without collapsing. This was the heart of the separation, not the sharp pain of leaving nor the anticipation of return but the steady work of becoming separate people who still carried each other in their hearts, not as obligation but as choice. One evening a storm rolled in. Rain fell hard against the windows, thunder rumbling in the distance. I made tea and sat by the window watching lightning flicker across the sky. In that moment I felt a deep quiet certainty. She was safe wherever she was. She was dry and warm and capable of weathering her own storms just as I was weathering mine. This was not loss, this was expansion. 2 lives growing in different soils under different skies but fed by the same root system, the love we had built before she left, strong enough to stretch without breaking. The rain softened to a drizzle, then stopped. The world outside glistened fresh and clean. I went to bed that night with the window still open, the air cool against my skin, the scent of wet earth rising from the garden. Somewhere she was sleeping too. Under a different sky, breathing the same air, dreaming her own dreams, and for the first time the distance between us felt not like a wound but like a bridge, something we had built together by having the courage to let go. The fern on the windowsill caught the moonlight, its leaves casting delicate shadows on the wall, a living thing thriving in the space between what was and what would be. I closed my eyes and slept deeply, without dreams but with a quiet knowing. This middle time, this stretching, this growing apart was not punishment, it was preparation for something new, something earned, not given, something built, not inherited. The night passed, and morning came, soft and certain as it always does. Thaw came quietly, no fanfare, no announcement, just a slow softening at the edges of things. It began with her messages changing not in frequency but in texture. The words grew longer, fuller, less like reports and more like invitations. She started sharing not just where she was but how she felt in those places. I saw a sunset tonight that reminded me of the blanket we used to wrap up in during thunderstorms, all oranges and purples bleeding together. Or I made a mistake at work today and instead of crying I just fixed it and felt proud after. The words carried weight, not the heavy weight of struggle but the solid weight of experience lived and learned. I noticed my own responses shifting too. Before I had written short careful replies: I hope you are well, be safe, take care now. My fingers lingered on the keys longer. I found myself sharing small truths I would have kept private before. Today a child at the library drew me a picture of a dragon with 3 heads. She said it was me because I am strong. I kept it taped to my desk. Or the fern finally bloomed, tiny white flowers I've never seen before. I think it missed you too. These messages felt different, not obligations but bridges, small, careful constructions spanning the distance between us. One evening in early autumn my phone rang. Not a text, not a scheduled call, just the ringtone cutting through the quiet of the house. I was washing dishes, my hands deep in soapy water. I dried them quickly on my apron, heart beating a little faster than usual. Her voice came through the line, warm and tired but clear. I didn't say hello right away, neither did she. We just breathed together for a moment, the silence comfortable, not heavy, the kind of silence that exists between people who know each other well enough to not need constant noise. Then she began to talk. Not about big things, not about achievements or struggles, but about the small architecture of her day, the way the steam rose from her morning coffee, the old man who sat on the bench across from hers in the park feeding pigeons with a tenderness that made her pause, the song that came on the radio while she was walking home, the one we used to sing badly in the car with the windows down. I stood by the sink, towel in hand, listening. I told her about the child who came to story hour with a scraped knee and how she refused to let anyone see her cry but held my hand so tightly her fingers turned white. I told her about the way the light hit the oak tree in the backyard that afternoon, turning every leaf to gold for just 10 minutes before the sun moved on. We talked for 47 minutes. The conversation flowed like water, finding its natural path, no awkward pauses, no searching for topics. We moved from the weight of winter coats to the kindness of strangers, to how she had started adding cinnamon to her oatmeal like I always had. She laughed, a soft sound that traveled 1,000 miles to reach me, and I felt something inside me unclench, a muscle I had not realized was tight for months. When we hung up, I stood in the quiet kitchen. The dishes were still wet in the sink, the towel still in my hand, but something had shifted. The air felt different, lighter, not because she was coming home soon but because the distance between us had changed its quality. It was no longer a barrier, it had become a space we could cross easily with words and attention and care. The year was melting, not like ice breaking apart violently but like sugar dissolving in warm tea, slow, complete, leaving behind something sweeter than what existed before. Her postcards began arriving with small gifts tucked inside. A pressed flower from a park bench, a tea bag from a shop she loved, a smooth stone from a riverbank she had visited on a rare day off. These objects carried no practical value but immense emotional weight, the flower fragile between my fingers, the tea brewing into a golden cup, the stone cool and heavy in my palm, each item a piece of her world offered freely to mine. I started sending small things back. A packet of seeds for flowers that grew well in containers she could plant on her fire escape, a bookmark made by a child at the library, a recipe written in my own hand for the soup she had always loved but never learned to make. I did not send these things with expectation, only with the quiet hope that they would find her at the right moment, like small boats launched into a current. One afternoon I received a package. Not a letter, not a postcard, but a small box wrapped in brown paper. I opened it carefully. On the kitchen table inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a mug, handmade, the clay slightly uneven, the glaze a soft sea green color. On the bottom she had scratched a single word with her fingernail before it fired home. I held the mug in both hands. It was not heavy, but it felt substantial, real in a way that words sometimes are not. I ran my thumb over the word home, feeling the indentation in the clay. This was not a statement of where she was, it was an offering of what she carried inside her wherever she went. That evening I made tea in the new mug. The warmth seeped through the clay into my palms, a different heat than my old mugs held. This one felt alive, shaped by her hands, chosen for me, sent across miles with intention. I sat at the table watching steam rise between my hands and felt a quiet joy, not the sharp happiness of reunion but the deep steady joy of connection maintained across distance. The fern on the windowsill continued to grow. Its leaves now reached toward the center of the room, as if trying to close the distance between itself and the table where I sat each morning with my tea. Two living things thriving in the same space, changed by time but not diminished. She called more often, not on a schedule but when something occurred to her, a thought, a memory, a question. Once she called to ask if I remembered the name of the street we lived on when she was 7. I did not remember, but we spent 20 minutes piecing it together through shared memories: the big oak tree in the front yard, the neighbor with the yapping dog, the bakery on the corner that gave away day-old bread. Sometimes the conversation was not about the street name at all, it was about building a bridge of memory together, each detail a plank laid carefully across the years. Another time she called just to describe the clouds. They look like mountains, she said, but soft, like if you could sleep on a mountain it would feel like these clouds. I went to the window and looked up at my own sky. Different clouds, different weather, but the same sky, the same air, the same sun warming both our faces, though miles apart. In that moment distance felt imaginary, a trick of perspective rather than a true separation. I began noticing the ways she lived in my daily life, not as an absence but as a presence. When I added cinnamon to my oatmeal I felt her near. When I chose strawberries at the grocery store I felt her near. When I paused to watch the sunset I felt her near. These were not sad moments, they were connections, quiet threads woven through ordinary hours, reminding me that love does not require proximity to exist, it requires only attention and memory and the willingness to carry someone with you even when they are not beside you. One evening a heavy rain fell. I sat by the window watching water stream down the glass, the world outside blurred and softened by the downpour. My phone lit up with a message from her: just got caught in the rain, walking home soaked but happy. There is something about rain that makes the world feel new again. I smiled and typed back, I am watching it too from my window. We are standing in the same rain, just under different roofs. Her reply came quickly, yes we are. In those 3 words I felt the entire year shift. The melting was nearly complete, not into nothingness but into something new, a relationship transformed by distance and time, not broken by it. The love we shared had not disappeared, it had changed form, like water becoming steam, becoming cloud, becoming rain again, a cycle, not an ending. I thought of the first day she left. The sharp pain of the screen door closing, the weight of silence settling into the house, the fear that I had lost her forever, that letting go meant losing, and I realized how wrong I had been. Letting go had not been loss, it had been an act of faith, faith that what we built together was strong enough to survive separation, faith that she would grow into herself without my constant presence, faith that I could learn to live fully even in her absence. The rain slowed to a drizzle, then stopped. The world outside glistened fresh, washed clean. I went to the kitchen and made tea in her mug, the sea green clay warm against my palms. I carried it to the table and sat watching the last drops fall from the roof, each one catching the evening light before disappearing into the earth below. My phone buzzed once more. A photograph this time not of a cityscape or a meal but of her hands holding a mug identical to mine, sea green clay, steam rising between her fingers. She had bought two. She wrote, "We can drink tea together even when we are apart." I looked from the photo to my own hands wrapped around the matching mug. And for the first time since she left I did not feel the distance between us as a wound to be healed but as a space we had learned to inhabit together, a space filled not with absence but with intention, with care, with the quiet steady work of love practiced across miles. The year had not been lost. It had been a necessary season like winter before spring, a time of dormancy that allowed for deeper roots to form. Now those roots were strong enough to support new growth, not the same growth as before but something more resilient, more intentional, more freely chosen. I sipped my tea. The warmth spread through my chest, a gentle heat that had nothing to do with the liquid and everything to do with the knowledge that we had both survived the distance, not just survived but grown within it. We had learned to fly alone and in doing so discovered that true connection does not require holding on tightly, it requires the courage to release and the faith to trust that what matters will find its way back, not out of obligation but out of choice. Outside the sky cleared. Stars appeared one by one, distant and constant. I thought of her looking up at the same stars from her fire escape or her window or a park bench somewhere in that city she had made her own, and I felt not loneliness but companionship, a quiet understanding that we were both learning the same lesson in different classrooms, the lesson that love stretched thin does not break, it transforms, it becomes something lighter, stronger, more beautiful for having been tested. The night deepened around me. But the house no longer felt empty, it felt full of possibility, full of the quiet hum of a connection maintained, full of the gentle certainty that whatever came next we would meet it not as who we were when she left but as who we had become, in the melting, the thaw, the slow sweet dissolving of fear into trust. I finished my tea. And knew without knowing how that soon we would stand in front of each other again, not as who we had been but as who we had become, and that meeting would be sweeter for the year that melted between us.